After simplifying your subject on the paper, getting it down in a drawing, look at it, and I've identified a center of interest where I have my figures approaching the bus. I put it a little high on the paper so I can make the most of reflections. I've minimized the buildings and the other components, the other parts of the piece, into just simple shapes. Windows, other things I will add as the painting gets into the later stages. Right now you can see I've started to build up the sky. Some angling strokes to kind of counter the angle of the building. It's a cloudy day and we want to give the impression that it's either raining or rain has just stopped. So I'm using veils of gray to kind of create that effect. While this wash is still wet, I feel it's a good opportunity to start place the building and the ever-present iconic Citgo sign that rests above the building. And the building, in this case, the colors are mostly composed of grays. I'm using yellow ochre as a base for the reason that the buildings themselves have a warmth to them, and I intend to use the distinguished yellow that you notice in the buses that travel back and forth in Boston. All of them have a distinct yellow stripe, a bright cadmium yellow, and this is giving me a little influence in how I'm structuring the colors within the grays. So you'll notice there's a lot of warmth in the buildings, in the reflections, and so on. To this, I'm adding neutral tint to gray it down, especially as it comes close to the street. I'm avoiding a few shapes, which you've noticed, one of them being the bus, another is an umbrella, and some random shapes that could be turned into figures or objects on the far side of the street. Continue to darken the lower section. This is giving me the graded feel that is really, I feel, one of the strong characteristics of watercolor, moving from a light to a dark or one color to another color. Through a big shape you get this graded wash, and it helps to create a feeling of reflected light or light moving through the scene. So I make use of that wherever I can. The strokes that you see me putting down, they could be windows, they could be decorative elements to the building. They're going to fade off quite a bit, but there'll be a hint of them in the finished painting. The left side is a vertical sign that comes in front of the bus stop. It provides a nice kind of framing of our scene. It's there. I think I've moved it a little closer so that it would fit into this vertical format. It's a sign that has a bright red banner on it, advertising a show which is in town of Matisse and his studio over at the MFA, which is just a short walk from here. In this too, I'm building up the color pretty directly. I'm not going to be layering the watercolor in this painting, but rather trying to finish it in a direct and finished state. As it dries, I'll be enhancing some elements, but very little will be done to the original washes. Now you see me building up the arch that forms the bus stop. It's a modern looking piece, and it has a nice countering shape to all the verticals and the square boxy shapes that are dominating the scene. This archway also acts as a frame. I feel it acts as a frame to the main subject below, which is buses moving through the bus stop and some customers approaching the bus. And that's what we're into now, is the painting of these buses. They have these giant windows on front, and they're very distinctive. They make it a little easier to paint when you have such a big face to the car, or to the, in this case, the bus. And what I'm doing now is starting to identify that. I'm painting it carefully. You can see I'm using a small brush, but as I finish the painting of the bus, I'll intentionally muck it up, or I'll intentionally blur some of the edges, or lose some of the whites, or run some of the colors into each other. This is in sync with the painting of a rainy day, where edges and shapes are softened, and things kind of run into each other and collide. You can see that strong yellow appearing now, that bright cadmium yellow, which is a clear marker of a bus running through Boston. And I've introduced some of that into the street. There's that red that appears in the sign of the Matisse exhibition. These strong colors will be effective in enlivening up my center of interest, bringing a little more attention to that area. Of course, I'm going to be playing with them, in other words, introducing some darker colors. As you can see now, the reflections generated by the bus, or the overhanging roof, or the buildings on the left side, or reflections from pedestrians and people waiting for the bus. Strong verticals as a visual element, as a descriptive element of a shiny wet surface. Nothing beats a vertical. When you can use a vertical, carry it straight down to the bottom of the paper, you get the idea that this is a reflection on a very wet surface. So you can see them starting to appear now. I've isolated a few whites, primarily in the area where I want there to be a sharp focus on the sidewalk that's the bus riders are standing on. I want to keep that white. I'll keep some whites in the reflections. Definitely some whites on top of the bus. We'll put in some additional whites towards the end if we want to highlight on our figures, or if we want to highlight on any of the structure. And yeah, I'm adding some gray now to that red, toning it down, washing it out, keeping the pitch of my board rather steep so that these wet washes that I'm applying to the street continue to flow down and create that vertical wash feeling. These darks I'm added are neutral tint, sometimes with a little bit of yellow ochre, sometimes with a little bit of red, sometimes with a hint of the ultramarine blue. Painting on relatively dry paper right now. The figures need a dry paper so that I can have some precision, so that they don't look like haystacks or bookmarkers or signs. I want them to look like people, so I need to have some precision. And you can see that it's starting to come into being now. The center of interest is pretty clear. Marks added at this point, from this point forward, are going to be mostly to adjust or make that center of interest more interesting, more prominent, create a feeling of a reflected surface, and build towards that center, I guess, is the primary thing right now. We're going to add some touches to the foreground, and we'll even add some touch to the Citgo sign up above to relate it to that nice red that we have in the foreground sign. Here's a reflection of our pedestrians madly running to catch the bus. It's a good place for a figure. It creates a little tension because you feel the bus is about ready to pull away. And you notice just now that I'm placing a little bit of red back there, an umbrella here. Little things, you see how late the detail comes. I feel once you get the big shapes stated and in their position and defined to some degree, it's the best time to add these details rather than in the beginning. Save them to the end when they can be related to the bigger shapes. Here I'm testing out a few windows to see how a few windows would look. You notice that the Citgo sign is faded off substantially. I feel I need to get that back into the picture. It provides a nice shape at the top of the building here. Well, it's coming to a finished state. From this point, it'll be mostly details.